passes, the Build Back Better bill, which of course would again extend the child tax credit. Many citizens across the country woke up this past month to find out that they had $400 fewer in their savings account or checking account. And that's primarily because the tax cut expired because Congress hasn't taken action. This is vitally important legislation. And I think, as you'll hear from everyone on the line, the American Rescue Plan increased the child tax credit for more than 65 million children, 90% of our country's kids, and 583,000 Connecticut children, and 123,000 right here in the 1st Congressional District. That's the kind of impact that a bill, and a shout out to Rosa DeLauro, who is the author of this bill, and we shepherded it through the Ways and Means Committee with Susan Delbeni and others, but Rosa DeLauro has been a champion of this. It took 18 years to finally get this child tax credit through. And I think it shows a stark difference between the respective parties and our view on tax cuts, especially when you consider that the $1.7 trillion tax cut of 2017, 83% of that went to the nation's wealthiest 1%. In stark contrast, in the American Rescue Plan, it was putting dollars back in people's wallets by way of a stimulus plan, and the child tax care credit that goes out to help working families of the middle class, and puts an emphasis on making sure that as elected officials, we try to lessen their burden as they deal both with this global pandemic and all the variants that all of us are dealing with, but also to ease that burden to make sure that there's money there to assist in the feeding and medical issues that children have. That, along with other issues, including paid family and medical leave, this Congress has to address. But nobody understands that better than the mayor of Hartford. And at this point, let me turn it over to Luke Bronin.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Congressman Larson. Thanks so much for your leadership on this issue. As you said, Rosa DeLauro has been a champion for the child tax credit, champion for lifting kids out of poverty for year after year after year. But you've been right there by her side in that fight, and we're grateful for it. And I think there are a number of people on this call who can speak even more powerfully and even more personally about the impact of this child tax credit than I can. But from a community perspective, this tax credit is transformative, and it's appropriate that on this day, when we reflect on the vision and the mission and the legacy of Dr. King and recommit ourselves to that work, that we recognize that economic opportunity and combating poverty was at the center of his vision and at the center of his mission. We focus often on what he said about explicit discrimination, about legalized bigotry. And that, of course, is an important part of his legacy. But his message of economic empowerment and economic opportunity is also vitally important. And one of the most important things we can do to fight against the continuing legacy of redlining and exclusion from economic opportunity and intergenerational poverty is to create opportunity for our kids now. And that's what this child tax credit does. At this point, there's study after study that shows that when families receive these child tax credit funds, they've used the resources to create opportunity for their kids, whether that's in the form of providing healthcare, providing childcare, providing clothes, avoiding incredibly painful choices between paying for rent or paying for school supplies, Those are the kinds of things that families are using these resources to pay for. And in a city where thousands and thousands of children in our capital city, in this, one of the wealthiest states in the nation, in this great country, live every day in poverty, in housing insecurity, facing food insecurity. This is a vital need for our community and for our entire country. So I am very grateful to our congressional leaders, Congressman Larson, to you for your tireless advocacy, to Congresswoman Chairwoman DeLauro for her years of work. And I hope that we do not let this opportunity pass to preserve the historic child tax credit and to continue its transformative role in creating opportunity and alleviating poverty for so many kids right here in our community and across the country. Thanks again for the chance to be with you today. And it's a privilege to be with everybody on this panel.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And now let us hear from Travis Woodward.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Travis Woodward. I'm an engineer with the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I'm also the president of CSEA SEIU Local 2001, a labor union representing tens of thousands of active and retired public and private sector workers. I'm the proud father of two beautiful girls. And when President Biden, with the help of champions like Congressman Larson, passed the American Rescue Plan in March of 2021, they were two of over 583,000 children in Connecticut who were eligible for this expanded child tax credit. This expansion is one of the largest ever single-year cuts for families with children and served as a direct and successful method for the federal government to put money in the pockets of lower and working class families. In my house, like many others across the United States, we use this money to help pay for the ever-growing expenses of food, utilities, and childcare. By allowing half of this tax credit to be distributed in advance via monthly payments, families were able to meet their financial obligations in real time rather than waiting for tax season to see this money. The success of this program is clear. But families receive their final check on December 15th, and they'll not see another check unless the Senate passes the Build Back Better Act, which includes a continuation of this vital tax cut. As a father who received this money and as union president representing thousands of families who relied on this money, I'm here today to call on the Senate to pass Build Back Better to ensure the expanded child tax credit is continued. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Mayor Luke Bronin.
Thank you, Travis. And like you, so many other parents have found how constructive the child tax credit is, and it's vitally important. The passage of the American Rescue Plan put us on the right path, but we now need the Senate to take action. Let me say that I'm heartened by what Senator Schumer had to say over the weekend, and getting the Senate back in this week and having a vote that will allow us, that will reform the cloture vote and allow them to move forward with legislation. Nobody in America and nowhere in the Constitution do you find that it takes 60 votes to pass a bill. And this reform is long overdue. I commend our two senators, both Senator Blumenthal and Murphy, who have been working hard to achieve this. But the bottom line is that people, as you point out, have to vote. And that's what we're sent to Washington for. And I think the kind of good news that's out there is a number of families all across this nation are prevailing upon Congress to do its job and to do what they're elected to do and cast a vote. Let me call on Rob Burrell now to speak as well. Rob?
Good morning, Congressman Larson, Mayor Bronin, and also Queen and Travis. Thank you both to the mayor and to the congressman for the wonderful work that you do representing all of the people of Connecticut and the people of Hartford and making sure that our public policy is directing funds where, particularly during this most difficult time, 2 years of a pandemic, A year after, a quarter of our workforce was not working, making sure that our public policy is directed where it needs to go. I was thinking about this morning and the significance of today. I think it should pain all of us that the speech that Martin Luther King gave about the other America, not the America where milk and honey flows, but the America where the invisible poor toil under the fatigue of despair, that America still exists, 50 years after he led a poor people's crusade in this country. And we see that legacy continue in all manner of expression in terms of racial injustice and in terms of economic injustice, and particularly in the ways in which folks have suffered during the pandemic. But this program, in terms of the child tax credit, makes an incredible difference every single day to working people, white, black, and brown, across the country at a time where those funds are more needed than ever. In Connecticut, just within the past couple of months, in December, 22% of renters reported that they were not caught up on rent. 33% of renters with children said that they were not caught up on rent. In October, there were 650,000 people in Connecticut that had a difficult time covering monthly household expenses. And in October, 11% of parents and guardians said that their children were not eating enough. That is what we face at this point in time, 50 years after Martin Luther King's dream really was to unite those two Americas. And that includes folks like the 5,000 childcare workers that Travis's union represents, people like the 10,000 home care PCAs that my union represents, 50% of whom are on public assistance.
Incrementally.
Our public tax dollars should be directed towards lifting people out of poverty, not making people stuck in them. And so I just urge all of our elected officials, all of our elected leadership to help folks like our home care PCAs, caregivers, who during negotiations last Thursday were reporting that their lights were being shut off. People were calling in and saying that they literally did not have enough to eat in their households. These are folks who are receiving public dollars, but are still trapped in poverty. So as opposed to that example of public policy being misapplied, I just want to lift up the courage of President Biden, of our congressional delegation here in Connecticut, most importantly of Representative Larson, Congressman Larson, who's just been a real champion on this issue in terms of making sure that we are campaigning hard and loud and proud to extend the child tax credit, because it helps the most vulnerable people in our society to get their basic needs met. Thank you so much.
Congressman,
Rob.
you're muted.
And now let me turn the mic over to Queen Freelove.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Queen Freelove, and I am the president of the Child Care Council of CSEA Local 2001, a labor union representing thousands of child care providers across Connecticut. On December 15th, the parents and the children I care for received their last check from the expanded child tax credit. The expanded tax credit meant that families with children under 6 years of age received $3,600 a year, rather than $2,000. For a family with children ages 6 to 17, received $3,000 instead of $2,000. Most importantly, this tax credit has helped families immediately by providing half of the credit on a monthly basis, rather than having them wait for a one-time payment during tax season. According to the latest Census Bureau, Dallas families spent 56% of their child tax credit on food and utilities or on rent. Without this tax credit, families were struggling, even though they wasn't eligible for the tax child credit, because even though I wasn't, because my children are older, I have grandchildren that I do know that this has greatly affected my children's children. We all know that raising children is the most challenging and rewarding experience, but when families are struggling to make ends meet, it greatly affects the future of our children. We would like to thank Congressman Larson for championing this important legislation, but it's time for the Senate to step up now and pass the Build Back Better Act to continue this tax credit to cut low and middle income families out. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Queen. And before we throw it open to the press for questions, Mary, I just wanted to again thank everyone for joining us, and Mayor Bronin, Travis, Rob, and Queen, thank you for, as the mayor said, adding your important insight to making sure that as we return to Washington, that we focus on the fierce urgency of getting this done. There's also a little issue called voting rights that the Senate needs to take up, and that will provide the impetus. But once the reform has taken place with regard to the cloture vote, we'll be able to make sure that there is a vote on Build Back Better, as has been promised. And if we are to make real the promise of our grand democracy, we have to make sure, as all of you have pointed out, that those among us who are in need of the most assistance to lessen their burden, to be able to provide for their children and their families, this is essential. And clearly, this is a time that Dr. King would not be arguing for gradualism. This is the time that he would be focused on delivering now. And so with that, let me throw it open to the press, Mary, if there are any questions.
All right. Okay, thank you. So for members of the media, if you just want to raise your hand, I will allow you to speak. If you could just state your name and who you're with, that would be great. Matt with Fox 61, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you all for holding this news conference on this very important topic. I'm back in Hartford today, and I just wanted to connect with you all about another important topic for a story that I'm working on. And I want to direct it first towards Mayor Bronin. Mayor, as you know, the 13-year-old in the Hartford public school system who overdosed on fentanyl. And I just wanted to ask you if there's any consideration being made to expand access in the community to the life-saving opioid overdose drug Narcan, and if so, what access points do we need there?
Apologize, I was muted. Of course, Matt, it's an important question, and of course the answer is yes. We are looking at this question broadly about how to expand awareness about the risks of overdose, awareness of Narcan and deployment of Narcan. As you know, the city of Hartford has been an early adopter and aggressive adopter of deploying equipping our first responders with naloxone or Narcan and training them to deploy that as they have many, many times. And it is devastating to think that similar training and availability may be necessary, not just for our adults, but for our kids. And that means not just that we should consider that question for schools, but anywhere where our kids are, after school programs, rec centers. We're actively having conversations with community partners. And of course, Superintendent and I are talking as well. So I think this raises a larger question of what we as a community and we as a state and as a country need to do to expand awareness as well as access to naloxone and Narcan. Now, I also think it's important to say and to acknowledge that there are still a lot of questions about this particular incident, but there's, as you can imagine, it's not just a question of whether Narcan is available or whether trained administrators of Narcan are there. Our fire department was on scene within minutes, but when a 13-year-old child becomes unconscious in a gym at school, overdose is not the first thing that comes to mind. And it is a tragic reflection on our society that these drugs are both as available as they are and as poisonous as they are. And so in the wake of this, we are working as a community to make sure that we are expanding our education and awareness efforts everywhere we can to every part of our community.
Thank you for that. Just a quick follow-up for you, Mr. Mayor. I know hindsight is 2020, but have there been any conversations in the past about bringing Narcan into the schools? Were you surprised or disappointed to see that it isn't already there?
Well, again, I think that the focus of our community, and I think most communities around the state and around the country, is on preparing first responders to deploy Narcan. And there have been many, many lives saved because our first responders are both trained and equipped with Narcan. And I think communities across the state and the country are going to have to consider what additional efforts can be taken, not just in schools, but wherever kids are, wherever where the people gather, to ensure that there are folks who are trained and equipped. The prevalence and the availability of this drug that is a poison and that is incredibly deadly demands that we look beyond just our first responders and ask where else we can do that. But again, I also want to stress that this conversation cannot just be narrowly focused on the response to an overdose. It has to be broadly focused on expanding awareness of the risks. We've seen that this drug, fentanyl, can show up in disguise in many different forms. We need to make sure that our kids know that. We need to make sure our parents know it. We need to make sure that our parents are having those tough conversations with kids as well about the need to be careful and to stay far away from anything that could be fentanyl. And so I think that's the broader awareness and prevention work that is vitally important.
Which I think is a good segue to a quick follow-up for Congressman Larson. Congressman, is there anything being done at the federal level to curb the abuse, the addiction, and help in the recovery of these powerful opioids?
Well, yes, is the short answer. And, prior to being immersed in the COVID pandemic, Congress was focused on dealing with the opioid crisis that we have throughout the country. Dare I say that hasn't abated, and focusing again on what the mayor said, the key here is to provide the kind of funding that's going to be needed for the ongoing education and awareness that needs to take place. I mean, anytime your heart breaks when you hear the story of a 13-year-old, and then I think all the appropriate questions that you're asking, where have we missed the boat here? What has prevented us from educating and getting into the community and making sure that people are aware of both the problem and also the remedies? And as the mayor points out, how do we make sure that our first responders, but also my daughter's a teacher and others that, in this case, if you're a physical education teacher, what you might be looking for. As the mayor said, it's not something in a gym class that you would normally think that a collapse had taken place be because of an overdose. But nonetheless, I think it points to the ongoing efforts, and this is a nationwide epidemic, as the mayor says. This is not the city of Hartford or the state of Connecticut. This is all across the country. And I think also the media is going to play an enormous role in this, in educating the public and keeping them abreast and aware of both all the precautions and preventative things, but also of the remedies like Narcan and other preventative efforts that the communities need to undertake.
Okay, thanks for taking the off topics, everybody. Thank you.
It's all right. Any other questions, Mary?
Yes, Christine, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to know, what are the chances that the child tax credit gets expanded this year?
Well, I think it's very good, and I do think, as I said earlier, I'm heartened by what Senator Schumer had to say over the weekend. But even more so, I think the outcry you're going to hear from people who, when they checked their bank accounts this January, they found out that there were on average about $400 fewer for a tax credit that had been enormously successful in lifting children out of poverty. And I think it's those kinds of questions, Christine, that motivate people to vote. But it's one thing to argue about something theoretically because it's not in front of you and it's not a bill that has specific consequences on populations in every single state in the union. That's in and of itself, I think, will help in terms of both, I think, under the inane rules that the Senate has on cloture and the filibuster, and allow a vote to take place. Most of America, frankly, is not caught up in the cloture vote and the filibuster. That escapes them. What they want to see is the country working together to solve problems. And the child tax credit is going a long way towards solving a major problem and lifting so many children out of poverty in the wealthiest nation in the world. So I think there will be a continued push to make sure that this vote takes place. And a lot of that is going to depend on what happens this week in the Senate. And that's why I think the encouragement to vote on Build Back Better, to vote on the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Act, these are going to be vitally important to moving the agenda forward.
So next Monday is the first day that you can file your tax return. Do you think that there's going to be confusion from people who might be expecting or in the past have gotten money back because this is an advance on the tax payment?
That's a great question. They still are going to be able to file, but it would be a far better situation if everybody was still receiving the child tax care credit, but they are still going to be able to file. And to your point, this always creates confusion. And so again, I think there's going to have to be an outreach effort here to make sure that we're educating the public so that they get these much needed benefits.
Okay. And why is it important to have it as an advance? Should it be an advance payment going forward instead of a one-time tax credit that you get when you file your taxes?
Well, every time I'm out in the district and the number of testimonies and anecdotal evidence from people, how grateful they were instead of, being able to apply at the end of the year and receive a credit to get that monthly issue. This is how, when people, especially in this time of inequity, the greatest inequitable case of growth between the haves and the have-nots. And when people in this country are struggling to make ends meet, it's far more preferable if they're getting it on a monthly basis, so that they don't have to, speaking of the fierce urgency of now, there's nothing more fierce than an empty stomach or a rent that goes unpaid during this time. And so this is why I think it's so important that we get this legislation passed and that option is available.
Mayor Bronin, did you want to add something?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. Just to echo what Congressman Larson said, but to say that And when Congressman Larson talks about an empty stomach, that's not hyperbole, it's not rhetorical. There are thousands of kids in this small city who regularly go to bed on an empty stomach. And were it not for school meals, would not know for sure that they'd have a breakfast or a lunch every day. And the budget for food or for rent or for healthcare or for a warm winter coat or for school supplies doesn't get paid annually. It gets paid daily, weekly, monthly. And so this monthly advanced child tax credit is central in lifting kids out of poverty, in lifting families out of poverty. And I should say, although, in this city, because I am the mayor of a city with a shocking degree of poverty, this tax credit is vital. But this tax credit isn't just about poverty. It's also about making it a little bit easier for folks who are trying to get into the middle class or may be in the middle class to make ends meet, because the costs of everything, including childcare, are going up, putting that squeeze on millions and millions, tens of millions of Americans. So this is a powerful anti-poverty tool. It is a powerful tool to lift children out of poverty. And it's a powerful tool to help create pathways of opportunity and pathways to get to the middle class or stay in the middle class.
And Mayor Bronin, can I just follow up on one of Matt Karen's questions for my colleague Leslie Mays? She just wanted to know, how are you moving forward with drug education in the schools at this time?
We'll be putting out some statements together with the school system in the coming days. So I just ask you to stay tuned. As you can imagine, there is already drug awareness and drug education that takes place in our schools. And I'll let the superintendent speak to that in the coming days.
Thank you.
Well, Mary, thank everyone. Mary, are there any more questions?
If anybody else has another question, please raise your hand. Not seeing any. So I think that's it.
Raises their hand.
They could do it through Zoom, but I don't see anybody else. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis, for pointing that out.
All right, I think that's it, Congressman.
Well, again, I want to thank the mayor, and I want to thank Travis and Rob, and also want to thank Queen as well for joining us here today on this occasion of remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King, and how focused we still need to be on making sure we're lifting all of our children out of poverty. And the child tax credit in this vote, as well as the Voting Rights Act, is it's going to do an awful lot for good in this country. So we wish the Senate all the best, but as both Travis and Rob and Queen have said, we implore the Senate to take action. Thank you and goodbye.